Hi, my name is Naomi Reavers, and this is my local history project. I chose the Minnesota Starvation Project because it's interesting to me, and I feel like it's relevant to the world today, just with everything going on between Russia and Ukraine. So, this experiment was done in 1944 when both war and starvation were raging on around the world. The question being asked was, how do we help these people recover after starvation? And what are the mental and physical effects on the body when it's been starved for a period of time? I honestly believe that the Internal Review Board would likely never allow an experiment like this to be done on humans again. There were 36 men who volunteered to be put through this semi starvation experiment. They were all conscious objectors to the war. They were housed in the Physiological Hygiene Lab at the University of Minnesota. And before being selected, they were put through many physical and psychological tests to determine whether or not they were healthy enough to participate. One test that was done was actually the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory Test, which was newly developed at that time. So, through the experiment, they were supposed to lose 25% of their initial body weight, and they were given charts and graphs to show how fast the weight should be going. One man in an interview after the experiment said that they would be given more or less food depending on where their weight fell on the chart, and that some hoped that they would be too light so they could be entitled to more food that day. So, to start the diet, the men were supposed to eat a normal diet consisting of 3,200 calories each day and continue their normal activity level. They were also supposed to walk 22 miles each week and work an average of 15 hours per week around the lab throughout the entirety of the experiment. The 3,200 calorie diet was to be continued just for the first 3 months. And then after the 3 months of regular calorie intake and activity level, the men began their 6 months of semi-starvation. This diet consisted of only 1,570 calories per day. And during this period, many of the men began to obsess over food. So they were thinking about food, dreaming about food, writing about food, talking about food. They were just obsessed. So their physiological state began to rapidly decline, along with their strength and stamina. The men also believed that their mental functions were declining, but the testing did not support this belief. During the semi starvation period, 3 of the subjects dropped out for not following the diet, and a 4th was excluded because he wasn't meeting his weight loss goals. So, after the 6 months of semi starvation, they began their recovery period. And during the recovery period, some of the men continued to lose weight, even though their calorie allotment was increased. The rehab period was 3 months of 2,000 to 3,200 calories per day. One of the reasons that they continued to lose weight was because when they were starving, their body filled with fluid. And once they began to eat, the fluid was finally draining, and that's why they were losing weight. So the war ended right in the middle of the experiment. Sorry, that was my son. So the world was very eagerly waiting the results of the study. So since the war had ended, the relief workers were trying to get aid to those who had been starving throughout the war. And they found that the people who were starving needed high-calorie foods, and a lot of them. The researchers were interested in which foods would best help these people recover. So during the experiment, the participants were given foods that would commonly be found in Europe and in places where people were starving. The men were interviewed 60 years after the initial study, but only 18 of the original bunch were alive to retell their experience with the study. So this is a picture that was taken during the semi-starvation period. The participants were always cold. So they would frequently lay on this hill and soak up the sun's heat. One of the men was excluded from the experiment during this time because he had broken the diet. During one of the required walks, the man stopped for Sundays all along the walk back to the lab. So after that incident, the remaining subjects developed a buddy system. Um, so during the walks, they would make sure to walk in a group so no one would give in, and the people who were working in the kitchen asked to be assigned to other jobs not related to food. Although this experiment was done so long ago, the results of the study are still relevant, and the ideas have been built on and used in many different situations, and not just the people suffering the cost of war. The findings from this experiment are being used to help more than people who have been starved during the war. Institutions dealing with recovery from eating disorders also found this information useful in their practice. Seeing how starvation impacts the brain as well as the body can also help relief workers understand what kinds of support need to be put in place to best serve these people and make sure they are fully recovering.
Okay.
Some of the men from the study reported that it took them up to 2 full years to get back to their normal selves after the study was completed. The results also told us that starvation and diet alone can affect functions in the body like blood pressure, cholesterol, and even a person's resting heart rate, which was previously thought to be mostly fixed. In the interview that happened 60 years after the initial experiment, most of the men reported looking back fondly on the experiment. I mean, starving probably wasn't super fun, but I think that they really appreciated what they were doing for the war, and a lot of them went on to do more more to help after the war. They did like missionaries and stuff like that. Just a really cool experiment.